Hi y'all, Mike Peace. Welcome to my shop for more tips, tricks, and techniques to help you become a better wood turner. It's amazing how often we get ideas that can help us in our wood turning that come from areas completely outside of wood turning. And the first one I want to show you today, it falls in that category. Crafters that use a razor knife, as well as quilters using a cutting wheel, often use a self-healing cutting mat. I've been using this one for many years. I use it for cutting veneer, as well as any number of other things, leather, paper, and thin pieces of wood and so on. This one is about 12 by 18, which is not a bad size. I picked up one at the dollar store. I think in Great Britain they call this the pound store. The grid is 6 by 8 inches, and it's also, the outside is about 7 by 9. It also it's laid out in a grid pattern. It makes it easier to measure or cut, and it's also got some angles on it. This one has some angles too. They're just not as well marked. This one's a little bit small for my taste, but for a buck, it can be pretty handy. It doesn't take up a lot of room, easy to get to. What I especially like about these things is you can cut on it with a razor knife, and they're self-healing, and it'll cut through the soft layer without cutting it out or really damaging it. It's got, usually these green ones have about 5 layers. It's got an inner layer which is very difficult to cut through, but they generally don't damage a razor knife in cutting. I use these for cutting, among other things, fur for elves, gonks type of ornaments as shown here. If you're interested in that elf ornament, you can find the link above. I want to give a shout out to Ron Crittenmeyer for this next tip on putting the switch in a plastic bag. Ron shared the idea that says, Mike, let me add a quick tip on those sewing machine lights. I've had several over the past 2 years, and the first 2 went bad after a few months because dust got into the switch and I was unable to repair them. I learned my lesson, and with the third light I sealed the switch inside a small plastic bag. It's still going strong after 18 months. Thanks, Ron. This same trick works very well. I've been using that trick on my emergency cutoff switch on my lathe, and I haven't had any problem with it. Let me show you a little trick that I found extremely helpful in sanding parts. Maybe you have a little nib on something, but you want to have it perfectly flat because you're going to glue this top of this head, for example, in this nativity set, where you just rub it flat like this. You don't want it necessarily ground off a lot. Maybe maybe a belt sander, it's too easy to get the angle wrong, or you don't have a belt sander. It might be a small part like this where you're trying to get it flat so you get a nice good glue surface to glue 2 pieces together. It's also handy, here's another example, in this winged box. Because it's got 4 tips and you want it to rest flat without rocking, you may be off just a little bit. You could just stroke this thing just a few times and easily get all 4 of them at the same level. Here's how we make one. We're going to start with a sheet of paper. I prefer to use 120 grit. Your taste might vary. You might go up to 150 or down to 100 or even 80. Line this thing up. This is 9 by 11. So I cut out a board out of MDF. I like to use 5/8, but if you've only got 3/4 inch, that'll work fine. So cut it 3 by 11. You carefully line up the edges, and using, not a craft knife because it'll destroy your craft knife, but using a disposable or a razor knife, go ahead and cut that edge. Next, we're going to use some spray adhesive on here so we can laminate this and smooth it down. I'm using some 3M Super 77 multipurpose spray adhesive. This stuff has never let me down. Get it at appropriate distance. Just hit it a light coat and turn it upside down to clear it so you don't get the nozzle stuck. Now we're simply going to put that paper on there, line up the edges very carefully. It'll be tacky. You can slide it around a little bit, but not too much. And then make sure you got it pressed down nice and flat. And there you go. Now, you can use this thing over and over. Here's how you go about. If you heat the surface, it'll strip very easily, as shown here in this little video clip. I'm using a heat gun, and that works very well. Some of y'all asked where I get this little beanie cap. I've got the location posted on my Amazon link, but basically they're do-rags or beanie caps or skull caps, and they're very inexpensive, and they keep the chips out of your hair. Of course, some of y'all don't have that problem. You can just blow it off with a compressor. But they work great. Some of y'all have been watching me for a while know I used to use a bandana tied do-rag, and it works as well, but it's a little more effort to tie the rag, so I really like these do-rags. The cotton doesn't shed chips quite as easily as the polyester.